Gotta wait for him to show up.
It's a start.
It is a start. We got to get back in the habit of it. Pierce has to set his alarm for the right time.
I kept having to work on Thursdays.
Okay. Don't make
I
excuses.
sent it through.
All right. Wait, sent what?
I sent it through on Telegram.
Oh, okay. Cool. Oh, that's another thing. Good call. Yeah, I always forget to send links out.
Dick will be like, "We got 2 people watching. Like, did you post it?" He's like, "Oh no, I did."
Oops. Sorry.
Sorry.
Let me pull up. Geez, my chat isn't even pulled up, but that's all right. We're in the starting phase, you know? It's startup of the show. Slow build up. IRL streamers. I'm going to drop everything with Murder the Media and just start being an IRL streamer.
Just only at gas stations, though.
Really shitty gas stations.
Right.
Where just people constantly ask me for money.
They're asking you for change. You're doing hot dog reviews.
This one with the texture, you can really tell it sat on that roller grill for an hour too long.
This is not pork.
All right, Warpig sharing it too. Ironically, our biggest fans are non-Christians.
I know, it's so weird. George Nada in the house.
George Nada, what up?
What up, George?
Crazy delay.
That's a stream delay. You know, takes time for the signal to
The things to go
bounce
to
from
places.
restream, and you know
Yeah.
they gotta move those packets physically too.
Right. China's got to grab that sound and bring it over there.
Exactly. They got a guy with a gondola for moving
Yeah.
this information.
Not to get technical, but they funneled the stuff through cords.
Fred Wong takes these packets, right? He's got to move them over to here.
Is that,
And he's got to grab other packets.
Steve Mateo's friend?
Oh yeah, Steve
Mateo.
Mateo from the famous Mateo hot sauce line.
Good stuff.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Just being a connoisseur of sands and dirts
And ketchup packets.
and ketchup packets would turn into one of the most famous salsas.
It's an
that we
American
know.
success story, is what it is.
You see, Pierce, Steve Mateo woke up hungover one morning, and he was craving chips and salsa. All he had, though, were a couple Hunt's tomato ketchup packets, some relish from a hot dog he had the night before, and some spicy sand.
And a dream. He had a
And
dream.
a dream. He had a dream and a vision. And, man, let me tell you, what a wild ride it's been for Steve Mateo.
That's a capitalist success story as well. It really worked out.
It's a Cinderella story come true. I think we got our audience.
Perfect.
Where's the cocaine? George asks. No. This is a wholesome show, sir. We try not
But
to
it's on
use
his shirt.
profanity. Oh no! What? My shirt.
Oh.
It's the shirt I was wearing last night, and I took a nap, and then I woke up.
TD sprinkles.
All right. So my shirt, has a bear that's holding cocaine and whatnot. But it's a wholesome show. All right, it's a show.
He's
everybody
holding
can
it so I don't have to.
Exactly. He said he grabbed those drugs from me and he said, "Not today, Nick.
That's right.
Not today.
It's a family show.
You don't need those drugs. I'll do them for you. You can't do these."
That's a solid guy.
Party Bear is a saint. He's a saint.
That's true.
What an allegory it is to Christ. You know,
Party Bear's been doing Dick Nicarlo's cocaine for 100 million years.
Real appreciates your contribution.
thank you, Big Gay Fred.
Big A Fred. Good morning. Good morning, Exalted Patriarch. Good morning, Gnostic. Good morning, Warpig. Good morning, George Nada. Kempin. What up, Kempin? Kempin ain't easy. Let's see.
Big Daddy Kempin.
Oh, that's chat from last night. I was reading Boo, I've met Dick in real life, and he smells like
Flowers and happiness.
flowers and happiness.
Yeah. Lots of different kind of verbiage from the nighttime shows in this show.
Yeah, my favorite is when people come in that don't like us.
Oh,
It's great. But they'll sit here and waste their time and be miserable.
We're giving
That's
you
all right.
views.
So we got a theme for today's show, right?
We do.
You came up with this.
I did.
Last week, but then I crashed my car that morning.
Yeah.
And, and then Jizz Mahoney's dogs.
Yeah, it was a fun morning.
Ah,
I really enjoyed it.
but we ended it with Miranda's.
We did.
What's the theme of today's show?
So it's turn the other cheek or turn over the tables, and that is basically me trying to figure out. By the way, I didn't tell you this because we haven't done this in so long. I accepted Christ.
He accepted Christ.
I finally just bit the bullet because I was having a hard time getting over the resurrection. But then I applied the same kind of standard I applied to everything else, which is you can't apply logic to something outside of space and time, and that's what faith is. So I took the leap, I prayed the prayer, and I accepted Christ. So as a new Christian, especially with the climate going on today, not the climate, but the political climate and the tension, I'm wondering, as a new Christian, what's Christ's view on war, on fighting our enemies, on defending ourselves? So that's why I wanted to ask Pierce, who has more biblical knowledge than I do, if we can maybe walk through it and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. First of all, that's awesome that you are a Christian. That's really cool, and it's amazing. And I think
Thank you.
on a kind of a side note, one of the cool things about, if you read a book called The Fox's Book of Martyrs, I believe it's by a guy named John Fox. I'm probably getting that first name wrong, but it's an entire. Huh?
Are you asking that to your cat?
Yeah, is that right? Is that right, Nicole? He tells me secrets and attacks my arm. So, Fox's Book of Martyrs goes over every known, provable martyrdom since right after Christ's ministry, when Christ died on the cross and ascended. And they say something along the lines of the blood of the martyr is basically the root of the church. Is the more people die for the faith or live authentically to it, the more the faith grows. And we had a pretty cush time in Christianity for like the last few decades, ever since about Billy Graham, the Second American Revival. And I like this idea of Christians being persecuted in America. It's nothing compared to other countries, but no longer will pastors be able to make profit off of being pastors like Creflo Dollar or Joel Osteen used to be. And all of these hipster coffee shops that are claiming to be these new age churches are going to have to just stop being churches, where the real ones are going to have to survive and be persecuted as best they can. And I'm glad for that. Now we're going to have real ministries and real people turning over. It's hard to become a Christian right now. There's no like benefit to it. It's a horrible time. And even Christ in his ministry was like telling rich people, you don't want to do this. This isn't for you. This is a hard thing. So I'm glad that you picked it, and of all time that God picked you that in this time period where it's probably the hardest to be a Christian.
But he's a man who likes challenge.
I do. Overcoming struggles has been a big theme of my life over the last couple of years. And, it's interesting that you say that because that also relates to a lot of things that we've been talking about lately, where everything has gotten so easy for everybody, because we have all this technology and everything's right there when we need it. And I think the virus has kind of shown us that, there is a deeper reality to things, that where it's not actually so easy. When there's a little bit of tribulation, you have a much harder time going through life so easily. And that's a very interesting parallel that's happening right now, as this has kind of been happening to me. And then, with my son about to be born, I realized I want him to be raised in the Christian faith, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to have him do something that I'm not doing. And I want to be not only a good father, but a good teacher of the word of the Lord. And in order to do that, I had to bite the bullet. And I know that's not a really good way to phrase it, but I had to take that leap of faith. And it's been great. And I feel better. And I just feel like I've finally taken that last step that I needed to take. So
that's awesome.
It's been great. So what's your perspective on the question of the day? I find myself in situations where I see all these videos of riots and the stuff that's happening, and I wonder, are we supposed to sit back and turn the other cheek, or are we supposed to turn over the tables and fight back?
Yeah, and you brought up a Bible passage in particular, Psalm 144, right?
Yes, sir.
What part in particular would you want to read that again?
The one that I'm looking at, the phrasing I'm looking at is
Sly Kane, thank you for following.
Praise be to the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield and whom I take refuge, who subdues peoples under me.
Yeah, and that's it's written by David. And at that time, it was a war-torn area, right? So then we see later on the same things. You see an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But then you see passage, and you see Jesus in the temples, in the marketplace they created inside of his worship place. And he goes crazy. He starts whipping these Pharisees, starts whipping the religious leaders at the time, and gets them out of there because it's his father's house and they're desecrating his name. It's a hard question because everything that they're talking about in those references is usually the premise that God is the one, vengeance is of the Lord's, right? God is the one behind the anger, behind the need for justice. And then in certain places, Jesus denounces violence, like when they're about to take him to go be killed. Peter brings out a knife and cuts the ear off of one of the security there, if you will. It's a hard question. I don't know what it means, particularly for this day and age when it comes to politics. But I do know there's a war, like you said, beyond what we see, beyond the fabric of reality of like, well, there's riots going on because of political division.
It's spiritual warfare,
beyond,
right?
yes, it's beyond what we see in our to our eyes. It goes deeper into the hearts of all men, and it's a hard question. You know, one of the things that Jordan Peterson talked about, when you hear the meek shall inherit the earth, everyone thinks meek means like these calm, peaceful, kind of pacifist people. There's a lot of commentaries that suggest that word, I believe it's praise or praus in Greek. It's like praus. And essentially meek back then meant those who are capable of using their sword, but don't always wield it. They know the patience or they know the time of when to wield it. I think the best answer does come from God telling us as the men of the household to protect our families, to protect ourselves. And I don't think it's a call to war, but I think it's a call to know when the time is to take your sword out of its sheath.
How do you define that time? When do you know that's the time? I think basically what you're saying is it's good to be able to defend yourself. It's good to know, when the time for war is, but you shouldn't go seeking it. So you shouldn't go out and try to instigate stuff. But when it comes to you, you should defend your life and your family with your life.
Yeah. And my answer to that would be purely hypothetical. I don't want to give a definite answer or a call to violence, because if you're anything right leaning, that's bad. If you're left leaning, that's just justice. So all this is hypothetical for the sake of my future. I think that it is clear that at some point the Proud Boys realized this when Trump talked about him and when the media slandered them. People have realized this before. There's no hope in a democracy fixing things as we see it right now. The democracy hasn't fixed things. And we've already been promised essentially by both sides of politics that whoever wins in America the elections, they're not going to be peaceful in submitting or conceding to that notion. The left wasn't peaceful the second Trump won. And I don't think that it'll go down peacefully at all if Trump wins again. I don't know what the right answer is. I think that the best answer, and maybe this isn't even biblical, is the issue with the McMichaels when Ahmaud Arbery was killed in Georgia wasn't that they defended their neighborhood. It's that hindsight's 2020, and now because they stood their ground in one aspect and didn't do it 100% the right way, now they can't provide for their families or neighborhoods at all. The second they were arrested for killing Ahmaud Arbery, Black Lives Matter was militantly with weapons threatening their family at their house, and the McMichaels were in jail or being investigated right then. There was no way to provide for their household, protect for their household. So if you're going to act, if you're going to be, I'd say, righteous in your anger, which I think is well deserved right now, to fight and to act, you also have to have the meekness to know, is this good optics, but is this beneficial for me and my family a day from now, a week from now, a month from now?
The long-term battle, or the long-term war versus, the battle you're picking.
Well,
your actions. Go ahead.
Go ahead, bud. Finish your statement.
No, I was going to say your actions go much farther than you can think you know, and I I don't think Ahmaud Arbery was in Georgia at a neighborhood that wasn't his for no reason. I think every evidence that we have proves that he was criminal, but because of the McMichaels acting a little fastidiously, we now don't have any justice at all.
Right, because they
guy-
forfeited the commandment of God, which is to protect your family, by taking a step outside of what they should have done. And I know everybody's got a different opinion on whether they did the right thing or not. I personally think they may have jumped the gun a little bit, not to use a pun. And again, they've forfeited their duty and their commandment from God to protect their families. And now what are they supposed to do? Now they're and this also gets back to something you said earlier about democracy not being capable of fixing the problems that we have anymore. Now, so for all of man's systems of governance or economies or whatever it is, for all the flaws and for all of the good that those things do, they do eventually run into a natural point of decay. And I think democracy is at that point now. And so what's the option? Should you look for another system or try to maintain the system you have that's made by man, or do you move more towards God's system of governance and try to let go and let God kind of handle this stuff? It's a very difficult position to be in because Christianity is on the decline. It's just as all deistic and theistic beliefs tend to be or seem to be at the moment. So when you have a populace that's so divided on all this other stuff, including belief in God and their particular pathway of religion, it's just one more thing that's dividing us and pushing those systems to their capacity and making them break down a lot more easily and a lot more quickly.
The issue with democracy right now is we have lost our Christian worldview. I don't know who I was telling this to, but when man tries to make law by man's code, we always see it this way. We see it straight ahead of us. And whether we mean to or not, ultimately we make rules that benefit some and not others. That kind of takes us out of the equation of guilt, where others are always found guilty. And God's worldview is above. He's kind of from this bird eye view where everything is a blanket statement that affects all men equally and holds all men accountable equally. So because we've lost our Christian worldview, men are trying to make these ideologies or recreate these dead men's agendas. And we start seeing people as, well, if we just fix them, then we'll all be good. It's like no one looks into the heart anymore. And also because we've lost God's, I guess, oversight, God's morality. Man's law is lumping these people into categories and criminalizing them already. I think that if we're going to try to fix what happened with something like the McMichaels, where even though I think all evidence points to Ahmaud Arbery being a criminal before, violating felony probation and not being punished for because of our great judicial system. If we don't, maybe before violence and before a few people commit horrible acts without thinking all the way through, and whatever name they want to claim, we should try to fix our local environment, our local politics. I mean, because we're not going to change it with an election for a president, not even a governor. I think it goes even smaller than that. And that could be the first step in acting or in fighting, so to speak. And I think that maybe that's my answer, before we get into any sort of violence, unless it is purely for defending yourself, I think we should try our hardest to be active in politics before that. Maybe try to reform politics like the church had to be reformed several times. I think that might be the best answer right now. And I don't think people think of that.
Exhaust all of our other options before we take up arms, is what you're saying.
I think so. I think that's what meek means, is to know when to use your sword. And of course, if your car's being attacked by rioters and looters, of course, if your neighborhood is now become a threat, not even Democrat politicians like Mayor Lightfoot she wanted guards around her neighborhood because she wanted to protect her family. It's like, well, no shit. Welcome to our world.
Right.
But I think a lot of people have not acted properly in trying to fix their world around them. And so now shit is hit the fan and they have to go, well, now we have to act violently. It's like, well, maybe there's still another option. Maybe there's still time. Maybe there's not, but maybe there's still time to reform what we know, how our world's run. Maybe it's time that there's time to reform that.
Okay, so you spoke of martyrs at the beginning of the show, and I think what you're talking about kind of gives us an interesting look into martyrdom, because when man's system of law starts to be corrupted to the point where self-defense is no longer has any meaning? Do the people who defend themselves and their family, as God instructs us to do, when they actually take up arms and they defend themselves, they just save the lives of themselves and their family, when the legal system fails them, do those people become modern day martyrs?
I think so, and I think that there's a big difference between a Dylan Roof and the family of the McMichaels. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of an obvious statement, like bowl cut kid who shot up a black church versus the McMichaels who were trying their hardest, even if they did it way wrong, to defend their neighborhood. This is beyond them. They were trying to act selflessly, where it's like, that's not even our house, but we want to try to make sure that this guy's brought to justice so this doesn't affect our neighborhood. That's a noble thing to do. There's a big difference between defending yourself and being a martyr that way, or trying to trying to fabricate this idea of you being some hero. And more often than not, people joke about Saint Kyle, like Kyle Rittenhouse. More often than not, people on the edgier side of the internet like to make saints of, I'd say, autistic morons. Mentally unstable people that, what was the end goal? To kill a few people that you think are in control of the world. Does it help your cause at all? Does it?
No.
I don't think that blood does anything to strengthen the foundation of a good thing. I think what it does is maybe creates a few more radicals that will still do nothing in the grand scheme of things. Whereas when we see people, even as funny as the old couple, and it's funny because of the memes. It's not funny because of what happened, but the old couple.
Yeah.
What's up?
The McCloskeys.
Yes. Yeah. That statement, that photo we have of just two people that looks like they've never held a gun seriously before, willing to hold their lives on the line just to prevent their house from being taken, their lives from being distorted by Marxists, and then go into jail for that. It's like, Jesus Christ, at what point do we go, that is something that inspires all of us? I think that's a great demographic that reaches to not only us at a 20-somethings, 30-somethings, but to people that are our parents' age that go, what were they doing wrong? And then that kind of stuff does embolden our movement, embolden our people to go back to saying, well, we're going to defend our house no matter what they do to us. Kind of the same as these people, like the people in Texas that have been arrested for opening a hair salon back up. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi goes and gets her hair cut at a private salon she requests to be open for her. That stuff is martyrdom, and it's a noble martyrdom in some form or facet. And I think that's a good inspiration. I don't think that becoming a radical and shooting up a synagogue or a black church is going to solve any issues. And I think you're missing the point on who the enemy is when you do that kind of stuff.
Well, I think there's a distinct difference between the McMichaels that you're talking about and some of these other cases where it seems like people took a step too far when their lives weren't actually in danger, and people like Kyle Rittenhouse, and people like, who was the bar owner who in the very beginning of the riots, he was getting attacked. He fired over his shoulder. Initially, the DA refused to prosecute. It was a clear-cut case of self-defense. Later, BLM basically showed up at the prosecutor's house and said, you have to do something. So he put in a black prosecutor, and then the black prosecutor brought charges back up. So the guy, his name was Jacob, MAGA guy, soft-spoken, long hair, he killed himself. Because he was so afraid of, he had defended his life to the letter of the law, been basically vindicated by the legal system, and then due to someone else's wrath and someone's in a position of power, someone's weakness, he then was right back where he started from, and he was screwed. And he felt, for whatever reason, I know there might have been some mental illness involved, maybe not, I don't know, but he felt that his only option was to take his own life. So the actions of BLM, were those evil, or were the actions of the prosecutor, the person who was in power, was that evil? I mean, at what point does a person who defends their life, at what point does the system fail them? And at what point does God save them? I'd like to think that this Jacob guy, I wish I could remember his last name, if anybody can help us out. And I know, Catholics and different denominations have different views on suicide, but I'd like to think that Christ welcomed him with open arms.
Yeah. On a side note, it's relevant. Suicide is, it's not in. Listen, and I know like you said, different denominations disagree on this. I believe in predestination. I believe that Christ, from before I existed, chose me and those whom he would choose. That does not matter what my actions were. My actions have nothing to do with my salvation except for the sin that made it necessary. Okay, I did nothing to contribute to my salvation except for needing to be saved. That's the only thing I did. And a dead man can't ask to be raised from the dead. Christ,
Jake Gardner,
whomever.
thank you, Donks. I
What was it,
appreciate
Jake Gardner?
Yeah.
Christ saved all whom he would save despite their actions, because none of our actions would lead us to heaven. All of our actions are led straight to hell. And from birth we hate God, and God says, and yet I love you still. So I don't believe that suicide negates your salvation. If Christ called you, he called you. And I think that people oftentimes minimalize or trivialize suicide into thinking like attention seekers and maybe mentally unstable. So, well, this guy was going through a literal hell on earth. This guy went through a whirlwind of emotions of thinking he was going to die, defending himself as best he could. He's not trained. He's not trained to defend himself. He's not trained to know that rioters are going to try to take his life. And then instead of the law working in any way that makes sense, he gets vindicated only to be thrown back into a political scheme that was going to put him in jail for God knows how long. And if not put him in jail, cause more attention to come to him, his bar, and his family. So yeah, he was led to this, because of this crazy world, he was led to thinking that death was the only option, because at what point was he not, at what point was he living the rest of his life behind bars? I think that war is oftentimes as well trivialized into this barbaric idea of physical violence, when we know, at least this is my opinion, the Cold War was never lost. They kept on fighting. It just wasn't with guns.
Right.
They bled into our academia. They bled into our media. And you can call that the Bolsheviks, whatever you want to name. I'll call it the Marxists. They led into media. They led into academia. And it took decades. It may have taken hundreds of years before this was even a thing where they were bleeding into our academia. But the plan was to always indoctrinate people that are in our very country. That's a crazier war strategy than just shooting us until we surrender. Imagine bleeding into our very country's fabrics and going, hey, by the way, children that are impressionable, this isn't how America should run. I have all the answers. Come and follow me. I'm your new daddy.
And over the course of several generations, too, just getting more and more and more.
Right.
Yeah, it's a war without loss of life. It's a better strategy for the person instituting that particular strategy, and it's almost more detrimental to the person who you're using the strategy against. I mean, a few 100,000 people, I know no life is trivial, but a few 100,000 people marching into battle, firing guns at each other, there's a clear winner, whatever happens. I think that's a smaller price to pay than the loss of every system and institution and an ideological position in the country, and switching it over to where you don't have to fight a war anymore because they're on your side now. You've spent the time to make your enemy yourself. Exactly.
The war used to be noble and simple, and it used to be we stand face to face, and whoever loses, loses, and that's what happens. Thank you, Kim, for subscribing.
Hey, thanks for subscribing.
Past that, we have now we've been in an era where chemical warfare was used. I mean, agricultural warfare was used, bringing about famines and whatnot. And beyond that, an academic warfare was used. And those are things that are not noble, that are not, I would believe, if there were, these war codes, I don't believe that even exist. I believe that everything that we've done has been, and it has been done to us, has been horrific. But because of that, my question is, what do you mean by fighting back or turning over the tables? Because I think that what we could do, and what we should have been doing for a long time, was doing the same thing they're doing, infiltrating academia, infiltrating the people that are in charge of impressionable minds that dictate what the future looks like. We're not doing that, and I know that people.
We're all part of a group. You know what I mean? I don't need to name them, but we're all part of that group, and that's one of my biggest arguments about people. Going on these public displays and everything and trying to get on the news and trying to get this media attention for their cause and whatnot. The best thing you can do is what they're doing, except the opposite. And that's be a good neighbor, build a community, reach out to the people around you,
right.
Challenge their ideas locally and show them, you're not insane for thinking this way, believing what you believe. And No, instead, we seem to be going about it the wrong way. We're going too hard with it. You know what I mean? We're going.
Right, because if everybody just followed the pathway that Christ lays out in the New Testament, if you followed that pathway, there'd be no need for war if everybody did that.
Yeah.
But for those people, and I can't speak for myself because, again, I'm a new Christian. I left the flock and came back. But for people that stayed on that pathway, they're doing what they're supposed to do, in our viewpoint. And the people that are falling away from that, the people that that have Baphomet T-shirts on and that spit, that burn the Bible, and do the people that actually hate Christianity and are straying further and further away from that. Those are the people who made the decision to turn their backs on a pathway that was working. So they're the ones who are bringing war, right? So I don't know at what point we're supposed to fight back. And again, like you said, there are multiple options we have to exhaust before we actually go to battle. But I know lots of people that think that it's inevitable. Lots of people that think it's inevitable and that it's coming to a head, and that Trump was kind of the litmus test for putting us in that position.
I think it's inevitable.
I know you do.
I think we've lost so much semblance of morals and tradition and whatnot. It's going to collapse before we can make anything better.
Because of that infiltration, our common ideas and our common values and our shared goals, those are completely devastated.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of the scaffolding that holds up a nation.
We can do what we can to help our neighbors, till it happens. But
so if we want to stay on the correct
as a
pathway,
society, we've denounced God so far. How do you convince everybody to go back to it?
That's true. I don't know, and I think that's the question a lot of people are asking right now: is what are we supposed to do?
Are we supposed to convince everybody to go back to it?
No, you know what? My opinion, no.
I'm kind of with Pierce on the predestination thing. What's supposed to happen is going to happen.
There's a beauty to that too. First off, let me say a quote. It's an old Christian Gnostic quote. Don't like the Gnostics too much, but they had a beautiful idea behind this. Burn everything that cannot be reborn. And that means to yourself, that means to this world, that means to everything, in every regard. If it's not profitable, if it benefits us not, then let it burn and stand on the ashes and the rubble. Very Mike Moss shit right here, but don't try to save what is already the foundations are crumbling on, but build your things that are important, your family, your house, your life on solid foundations, and you won't have to collapse with the inevitable destruction, the inevitable demolition. When it comes to predestination, don't let that thwart you from the idea that you still have to evangelize in whatever way that means. Charles Spurgeon said, if I could lift the shirt of every man's back and see elect on their back, I would preach to only them, but I wasn't given that privilege, so I just preached the gospel to the world. And that goes a lot farther than just preaching the good news. It's also living, like we're talking about, living like someone that follows Christ. And Jane was saying in here, some of us are working on the ground, but too few of us, one classroom at a time. Absolutely, one classroom at a time. I think that if you want to beat them, if you want to beat the evil principalities of this world, then you have to do what they do, like you said, but in reverse. But preach the life, but preach the truth in reverse. And there's a lot of people, we know a lot of people in our movements that are brilliant, that are smarter than the professors that are in colleges right now. We know a lot of people that are working trade jobs that are the backbone of America, that are way better and way more equipped and way smarter than anybody that's in our politics or that's anybody that's in our government right now. So keep doing that. Keep spreading those things in whatever way it's possible. You don't have to become a professor because that's the only way to fix this stuff. I'm talking go into trade jobs, go into your local government. We've got people doing that. Nick Oakes is running for office. Enrique ran for office. Laura Loomer. We've got people on our side, even if we don't agree with everything they stand for, per se. They are on our side. They are the ones that are fighting right along with us. So keep doing that. Every facet you have, there's a thing in Christianity that we kind of, for like a primer, we dubbed it a big C and little C calling. Kind of like Catholic means universal church, but it also means capital C, which is capital C. The Catholic Church, which is the denomination in particular. There's a little C calling, there's a big C calling. The big C calling is be a Christian and live what that means as best you can. Not because it gets you to heaven, but because It's what changes the world in a good way and your life in a good way. You have to die to yourself every day. The Bible says to preach the gospel to yourself, to die to yourself, to carry your cross daily. That's before you go out into the world. You die to yourself when you wake up. Okay, you live by telling the truth. Thank you for the
Thanks for
follow.
following, Draven.
You tell the truth, you live honorably, and you die for that whom you love most, whether that means physically or spiritually or both. Past that, the little c calling is whatever your heart's desire is when it comes to my goal is teaching, my goal is to be a plumber, my goal is to be on a podcast. You do that the best you can, and you do that for God. And that goes beyond just this fluffy idea of like, I'm just doing this because God told. No, it's beyond that. It's a battle. It's a war. Paul calls salvation this wrestling war. He fought the good fight. He won the race. It's not something that's fluffy and supposed to be a Hallmark card. This is it's a battle. And I don't think that the battle needs to just begin with violence and with bloodshed. Obviously, defending yourself might have to lead to that. But I think that our war can be fought in our jobs, in our careers, and our neighborhoods. And I think that needs to be exhausted before we begin the fight. Because you know what's going to happen. Anybody that's relatively for God or for conservatism is going to be labeled a white supremacist. We've seen that in the debates. We've seen that in the news. We're not going to be looked at favorably for most of history if we fight first in that regard. But if we break down the academic structures, if we break down the local politics, if we break down our churches and we reform them to be reflecting of what God truly wants, of what truly is honorable and noble, then we can be the people that write the history books. We can be the people that go, no, this was a time where we fought back from demonic people that wanted to bring America down, that wanted to bring God out, take God out, and crucify him again.
So the answer to the question that the show title, Turn the Other Cheek or Turn Over the Tables, I think the answer is both, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
You have to, just as we're told, the meek shall inherit the earth. I think it might be, and this is what I'm getting from the conversation, that our job is to become the meek, to be physically able, to be spiritually able, to be, psychologically able to make yourself the most vicious adversary possible for the largest amount of people, and to just stand back and be ready for when that's needed. Going to the gym, eating right, conversations like this where our intellect is kind of bouncing back and forth, and we're honing that. These kind of things, and then also what you're talking about, Nick, worth doing your best to be the best you can to your neighbors, to your family,
right?
To live through Christ on earth with the people around you, for
setting the example that you want to set.
Exactly, and preaching the gospel to as many people as possible. I think those things culminate in a soldier for God, and a soldier of light, who can be prepared for all this stuff and be activated when the time is right, but who until that day will continue to follow Christ's path as he laid it out, to stay away from war. That's what I'm getting out of this conversation.
I missed part of that because my machine decided to turn off for a second. But
shoot.
No, I heard most of what you said, and I like it. And a lot of people are in the chats agreeing with us in different aspects too. Even Michael Wade says, "I do this, but I'm not a Christian, Gnostic, pagan at best." Good. No, I'm telling you, man. I'm wrestling with this idea on a side note, and this is going to sound very heretical. I don't know how I'm going to put this into words yet, and I've been trying to. But number one, I don't think that you have to be a Christian to understand that the West is dying and that that's a bad thing. That's a pretty obvious thing to say. I don't think you have to be a Christian to do that. There are plenty of pagans. There's pagans for Trump, by the way. I was watching Gavin do his DC tour for the Trump rallies when Trump was in the hospital. There are pagans for Trump. There are atheists for Trump. There's a whole lot of groups and stuff like that. Beyond that, I think that Trump he's not perfect, by the way, and I know that. And I didn't vote for him last term, but Trump is this poster child right now of getting America back somehow, of a new love or a renowned love for nationalism, And that is helping your neighbor. That is your literal neighbor. You know, nationalism benefits the people in our country, benefits the person that's next door. And you don't have to be a Christian to be on that side, on the side of righteousness. And by the way, I think that that's also what meat can mean. If shit hits the fan, we're not supposed to just kill everyone. You know what I'm saying? We're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be a targeted defense where we take back what is ours. That's what war is. And we're not trying to genocide a people because they don't believe in our worldview. I'm not trying to have a theocracy, though I think that would be pretty dope. So, yeah, I love people that are on the same mindset or the same path that we are, even though they disagree on certain things. But I think a lot of people are turned off by Christ because of claimed Christians. Gandhi said, "I really like your Christ, but I hate your Christians. They're nothing like your Christ." And if I could say one thing to a dead man, it'd be to Gandhi, and it'd say, "Then they're not Christians." It's as simple as that. I'm Dick Nicarlo's brother. Oh, really? You don't seem to look like him. Oh, well, I'm his brother. Like adopted? No, I'm his biological brother. And then, well, what's he like? I don't know. Where's he live? I don't know. I know nothing about him, though I claim to be like him or be kin to him. I'm clearly not him. So if you claim to be Christian, it matters not. It's what your actions show. And the name Christian came from Christians being mocked in Antioch. They were walking around and they were like wannabe Jesuses. That's how like Christ they were. And so when they call someone Christian, it meant little Christ. They were making fun of them. Like, oh, you're just Christ wannabes. That should be what we live like. You said something earlier too. Be physically ready, which is what meek means, right? To be able to unleash a sword, but know when to use it and have the patience to not unleash it. A lot of the edgelords that are in our groups, that are in our chats, that are watching our shows, there's no disrespect to this, and I mean this with sincerity as someone that's not perfect myself either, because I'm teaching this to myself as well. You're not going to change the world if you're not physically apt to. If you think that violence is the answer, then you're not going to change it unless you're physically apt. It's also, if you're a Christian, your body is a temple, and I believe it's beyond spiritual. I believe it is physical. That is why debauchery or hurting your body with prolonged abuse in any form or facet is a sin. It's not because God doesn't want you to have fun and get high, or God doesn't want you to have fun and wreck your body by cutting yourself or something like that. It's because your body is meant for something. It's a vessel. And it's something that's going to be necessary at some day, either to defend your family, to defend your country, or to defend yourself. And if you're not physically apt, mentally apt, spiritually ready, you need to be as best you can. I'm not talking about the 80-year-old, hey, you need to go run 10 miles. But if you have the ability to be physically active and you're refusing to do so, that is on you. And that is something that you need to fix first. And I don't want to become the left where, I don't want to become the people that fetishize being a victim, where we always go, well, we're getting attacked. This sucks for us. We should do something. And then you never do something. If you believe that something needs to be done, whether it is bleeding through the academia or actual bloodshed, you need to be prepared for that. And you need to be on the offensive for that. You need to be ready. You can't just expect to be able to armchair what's that term? Armchair quarterback?
Yeah.
You can't be expected to do that while you're 400 pounds and talking about how, you're ready to take down Antifa or Marxist or the demons or whatever.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
What about shunning the institutions? I mean, if and I completely agree with you, because I follow the timeline of this, of the infiltration of the left into academia and things of that nature. What about just shunning those institutions? I mean, you have to realize that at this point, the amount of effort it would take to take back those institutions is probably not worth it when we could be doing things like you're talking about, training your body, training with your weapons, preaching the gospel, becoming the best soldier you can be. And when I say soldier, I don't mean a guy standing there with a gun ready to kill people. I mean somebody who's a strong follower and who will be of use to the Lord. So shunning those institutions, and I know that a lot of people will say, well, you're just giving up. I think it's better to use your effort for things that are going to be more beneficial overall. Really, with YouTube and the internet, and I'm an autodidact. I'm self-taught. I've never been to school. I dropped out in ninth grade, actually. I think that we're at a point in civilization that we don't need academia. I think all it does is lock you into a worldview that someone else is putting in your head. So why not just give up on it and not worry about it?
Before that, let me answer the question of Warpig, because Warpig is one of our non-Christian boys in the chat.
That's what
That
I'm trying to
argument is
keep up
good and
with.
all.
Yeah.
What I was referring to, he said that argument's good and all, but what happens when there's a majority of loud, false people claiming Christianity? You know some of those, the ones I mean. What do you say to those Spurgs P that claim the moniker without the practice? Simply put, they're not Christians, and that's why I'm glad that some form of tribulation is finally happening in America to Christians. Again, it's nothing compared to what happens in China or Africa or the Middle East by any stretch of the imagination. We're not put in cages and burned alive like the Coptics in the Middle East.
But it can get there. It can easily get there if we lay down.
And in a way, number one, I think it's going to happen no matter what. And I especially think that if we infiltrate back in whatever way that means, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen. It's going to be expedient. Warpig, the answer to that is I'm glad that tribulation is coming, and I'm glad that more will come. In one regard, the wolves will leave the sheep's herd. There's not going to be any more people that are going to be falsely claiming Christianity to go to heaven, because they're going to realize, oh wow, it's either my belief just so I don't go to hell, or it's to have a good life right now, and they're going to pick the good life anytime they want. They're going to be the ones that turn away from Christianity, that turn away from the church, and good. I don't want them. I don't want weak men or weak women that just want to use Christ as a prostitute to get what they want and leave when they're done. And so, yeah, I'm glad that this is happening. And to those people out there, he refers to them as Spurgs. Bye. I don't want you. And I'm glad that this is happening to get you out of the herd. In regards to should we shun academia, it's a tough question, because I don't know what the strategy is next. I know that obviously people we know are losing their rights to use certain banks, to use certain apps, to use certain social media sites, which are becoming more and more of a human right, whether I like that or not. I've had this. I'm reading Heidegger again, and I'm becoming more and more against technology again. Like when my girl comes down to visit, we're not using our phones. I didn't use a VPN to create a new Facebook or Instagram. I'm done with it. I'm using the only social media I have is to make sure that my podcast can get out to people. That's it. If I don't have a podcast anymore, I'm not alive on social media anymore. That's it. But I do think that their strategy might be, if we shun academia, they might make it to where somehow you have to be in some form of indoctrination, in some form of academic structure in order to have any job later on, especially with things happening like automation or the singularity, whatever you want to call it. Trade jobs and blue collar jobs might be the thing of the past at some point. Not now, not now at all. And I'm not sure of any of this. I'm just saying I think that to completely shun it might be a good answer, but there might be something behind that they trick us with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think there's something that's, as technology gets better and as society moves more and more away from where it's supposed to be, I think what's happening is those institutions, social media, academia, banks, those are revealing themselves to be what I've always thought they were, which is evil. I mean, there's definitely elements there's definitely satanic elements to all those things, especially with social media, because hive minds themselves are no good. It takes away the individual, and then people start living for people's likes and people's opinions of them online. They're not living their true life. Banks obviously are institutions of evil. I don't need to get into why that's true.
Yeah.
You know that's true inherently. And then academia, which I see your point. You're making a good point where maybe it is worth taking back because it will be beneficial to us later. But I would disagree. I think that me personally, my job that I got, that I'm furloughed from at the moment, I didn't get that by knowing anything about the position. I got that by being kind of tangentially related to that field, and then going and working with those people, and then proving myself there, and then boom, I get to but I get to run a department within that. I think that's true of anything. Obviously, you can't teach yourself advanced robotics and stuff like that on your own, but there are more and more growing places online that you can learn all those skills yourself. And I think the idea of institutions outside of the church, I think they feel evil to me, and maybe I'm crazy, but that's just my opinion.
I think you're right that they are evil, and I don't know the answer if because I see both sides. I don't know if the answer is to shun, and I don't know if the answer is to infiltrate. I know that both sound good and both may have their flaws, and both one or either of them might be futile. I just don't know which one that is. But I do know that God didn't put convictions in your heart to be certain things for no reason. Like God didn't put a conviction in your heart. God didn't put this. I don't want to abuse what God gave me. And at some point, I feel talented enough to at least be able to do a show. And so I want to use this to the best I can to spread messages of good on a show. If someone has that conviction with being a professor, with being a doctor, those things do require schooling. And I don't think that those should go away, and your conviction should go away, because as of right now, it seems hopeless to be a professor or to be a doctor and to go to these schools that are completely against you. But I'm not sure of the answer. It's a good point that it might be futile. I don't know if it is yet. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that you're called to fight in whatever regard you're in, whether that's a mom and pop shop, a social media influence, or an academic structure. You're supposed to fight. You're supposed to do that. And I think that our children's minds are being diseased by social media, by academia, and both of those things we need to reform. And there are things that are reforming slowly but surely. There are places that are refusing to just have Marxist ideologues in colleges. There are social networking sites like Gab and Parler that are recreating social media in a way that it still might not be healthy to be on social media, but it's certainly not going to ban you for your opinions or views. There's a lot more things I'm seeing along the way.
I don't know, man. And I'd really like to get your opinion on this too. I think the reason the fact that our children's mind are being poisoned, whose fault is that? That's our fault. That's not the fault of the people who are doing the evil. And
we let it happen.
Right. And it's so once we start we need to start, like you said, locally, taking back our families, taking over the education of our children, and
if you have to put your kids through public school, which I don't think anyone has to,
right?
But if you have to put your kids through public school, be active in what they're learning. Ask them everything. What did you learn today? What did you learn in this class? What did you learn here? And if anything strikes you the wrong way, raise hell.
Because then you're constantly having to correct. You're in a battle with education. You're constantly having to correct the things that they're being told, and you don't know what's going to stick and what's not going to stick.
And there's too many people that have become lazy and complacent with the way society has just denounced morals and standards and whatnot. They're the same people that just treat school like, okay, this is where I just drop my kid off during the day. This is where my kid's time is occupied. That's all it is. No, guess what? I shouldn't say that word. Guess what, guy? You just kind of passively let your kid just get indoctrinated, and then you wonder when they turn 18 why they or even earlier than that, why they start dyeing their hair weird colors
and wearing the hammer and sickle around
wearing the hammer and sickle. Where did I go wrong? You weren't there.
I think we should stop blaming institutions and start really living for taking personal responsibility, which is it's the very fundamental basis of how to live a good life, is taking responsibility for your actions, taking responsibility for the people around you, and especially and including your family. Your children are. I've heard this said before, that you die twice. You die once when you take your last breath, and you die again the last time any reference of you is spoken in the world. Yeah. And what you do with your life widens that gap and gives you a little bit closer. This is a non-theological view of eternity, of an eternal life. What you do to widen that gap. For example, what Hitler did or Stalin did. Those are two things you could do to widen the gap, because people are going to be talking about those two guys for as long as there's human beings, or as long as there's discussion is allowed. But who else people are always going to be talking about? Jesus Christ, because of what he did with his life. So that starts with personal responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself, the people around you, and not blaming the institutions, not blaming these huge outside powers, because you don't have any control over that. You have control over yourself, and you have control over the lives that your children live.
Exalted Patriarch makes a good point. Television and movies tearing apart nuclear families, but more importantly, what I wanted to point out, television and movies, yeah. Again, the same people that treat school like just the drop-off center for their kid 5 days a week are the same people who, oh, I'm tired of listening to my kid. Let me throw on YouTube or Netflix for them, and then,
Right.
you know, even the child-safe modes of those things.
Oh, no.
There is still such sneaky programming in there that's disgusting.
Yep.
Jiz Mahoney caught it a couple times with his daughter. I was standing right there in the living room, and then like weird stuff on this little girl's themed channel popping up.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That, like
It's-
Elsa Gate. You remember that on
Oh,
YouTube?
yeah,
With
yeah.
they had basically like
It was like Middle Eastern and Russian
AI
algorithms.
that had like Hitler dancing with Spider-Man and the Hulk like
Right, where
on the
they're
toilet.
eating fecal matter.
Right.
Or they're you know,
Right.
it's just weird. Stop being lazy.
Well,
Stop being lazy.
last night, I guess I gave my son his first lesson, and what I mean by that is I read, we've talked to him and stuff, but I finally read him a book last night while he's in my wife's womb. I read him a book of prayers, little short prayers for children, and I think that was the beginning of me trying to take responsibility for what he learns, and it was a beautiful moment, and I'm going to be able to remember that forever because it was so awesome to be able to do that for the first time, and I don't watch movies, I don't really watch TV. I learn stuff. I hang out with my wife. I have been reading a little bit more, not as much as I should, but and that's the kind of stuff. Your child is going to have the life that you give him or her if you take responsibility. Otherwise, they're going to have the life that these institutions and the powers that be give to them. You have to fill that void. You can't leave it open. And I'm not saying control every aspect of your child's life. I'm saying give them a good foundation so that they can be meek, so they can be the meek at the end of the day.
Give them enough freedom so they can learn from their mistakes, but don't let them decide everything. Don't let someone else decide everything for them.
That's right.
Let me clarify my position on that too. I think that the war is on your family and the war is on your children, and that's the first way to fight back is to take back control or to never give control to the enemy in any form or facet when it comes to media, when it comes to temporarily abandoning your kid because you're selfish and you want to go play your video game and you put a YouTube in front of their face or you put Netflix in front of their face. I completely agree with that. My part about schooling leads to this one thing. You said you don't have to public school. And in America, you're right. As of right now, you don't have to public school. You can homeschool and you can private school. Two things with that. Number one, in Germany, in a lot of countries, homeschooling is illegal. Essentially, your child is a child or a product of the government. They go to these public institutions. They are taught certain things by certain parameters, always, no questions asked. I don't want it to get to that point. And I think that there's still hope with that we don't have to. If there's an option to bleed back into academia, good. With private school and with homeschooling, a lot of times there's these homeschool groups, there's these private schools. And going to private school my whole life until college, I learned a lot of kids. I'd say the vast majority of kids there's two kinds. There's parents of homeschoolers that were finally too busy with work, and so they put them in the Christian school. They seem to do relatively fine. They might have been a little socially awkward at first, but they kind of learned the ropes. And then there's the other one, the kid that's the problem child, and instead of going to a charter school or instead of going to military school, they put him in a Christian school and fix him, right? Under these quotes, they fix him. Well, he'll get Jesus that way, and that's good. In both ways, you can do the right things and send your kid to Christian school, but if you're not, like you said, Wagyu, if you're not putting Christ as the forefront in your household with your actions as a father, with your actions as a husband, with your actions in front of those kids, even when they're not looking, because they're going to see it. It doesn't matter how Christianized their worldview becomes through school. They're not going to see their father living the way they should.
Right. Yeah, you've just passed on responsibility of raising your kid the right way to someone else.
Absolutely. And by the way, kids know that. They're smart, man. They know when they're being thrown to somebody else to be fixed. They know that stuff. There was a thing that my mom said once when I was a kid, and she said it several times, but it stuck with me. I was like 4 or 5, and my mom was crying in the car. Her and my dad had gotten into a fight for whatever millionth time. And what she meant to say and what she said that I heard was something different. She said, the only reason we're together is to make sure that you have a good life and have parents in your household. And all I heard was the only reason you're miserable is because of me. It didn't matter that I went to a Christian school. It didn't matter that we went to church on Sundays. I knew that my parents, whether it was one person's fault or both, they weren't living the way they should have been living. And it affected me. And it affected me for a long time. I didn't know how to cultivate myself to be a good man for a good woman. I didn't know that relationships were supposed to be healthy. It's a weird thing where it's like, well, no shit. But at the same time, I didn't know that stuff. I didn't see that lived out in my life. And that's the first rule. That's the first battle you have to fight is a battle against yourself, especially if you're married, especially if you have kids. You need to constantly die to yourself and constantly showcase Christ in your life, no matter how hard it is. It is a war. It is it's a battle, and it's rough. And it's dude, no one always feels like they're going to be the smiley dad that's reading the Bible at all times. Sometimes crap happens, and you think that hell is near, and it's hard to put on this face or to be the leader as a man.
But it's how
to be the
you
leader.
deal with it. It's
Yeah.
like it's like 10% what happens to you and 90% how you deal with it, and that's the example you're going to set for your children.
Yep.
Man, this has been very enlightening for me. It's definitely answered some of my
Same.
questions, and you know, it gives me more of a catalyst to begin living, to continue to live this way, and to constantly improve. Because if you would have known me 8 years ago where I was at that point in time, it is obvious to me that Christ has put me in the position to meet the woman that I met when I met her, to have this, to have a child when I'm having the child, has put everything around me, built a cathedral around me in which I can thrive, even though there's a pandemic, even though I'm furloughed, even though all this stuff is happening. So it's not I'm going to believe in Christ because it's I'm going to believe in Christ even if. And I think that's the takeaway from all this stuff.
Absolutely, man. I agree. This has been a good episode, and I think that that's the number one takeaway. It's not attractive anymore to have the title Christian. It's not attractive anymore to be a father for your kids or a husband to your wife. It's not attractive. These aren't popularized in media anymore. And like Christ said, the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. The Son of Man is not guaranteed tomorrow or food for tomorrow. But even though that might be the fear, that might be the reality, man, it's worth everything. It's worth way more than any selfish idea you have of what you want in your life, man. Your life is meant to cultivate other lives. That's another battle, man. Have those kids and raise them right. And somebody said, and I think it was Babe in the chat, they won't depart from it. That's a promise of God. The covenant of God extends from not only you, but to your children and to your children's children, but only if you are showcasing those covenants, those promises of God, only if you are living the Christ figure life for your kids.
Because you're a bridge between your child and the Lord.
Yeah.
So build a sturdy bridge.
Yeah. Don't let anybody else be your kid's bridge to enlightenment. Don't let anybody else.
To anything.
All right, guys. Well, it was fun.
It's a good episode. It's a real good episode.
I liked it.
So next week, Thursday morning.
Next week, yeah, guys, we do this Thursday mornings at 10 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central. And then we got a bunch of other shows on this network. This guy over here does Blackballed Podcast and Blackballed Radio, 11 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Also this afternoon at 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got Thunderdome TV Daily Show, and tomorrow as well. So yeah, thanks to the new followers and everything.
Absolutely. And
those other shows are not as informative, I would say, or wholesome. Those ones aren't so much family friendly and whatnot, but it's entertainment, you know. But yeah, Thursday morning we'll be back here next week, 10 p.m. Eastern.
10 a.m.
Right.
Eastern.
10 a.m. Eastern. Ugh. All right. Sorry, I'm tired.
Goodbye and God bless.
Right? We're ready to end it. I
Yeah.
got to get some opening and outro stuff for this
We'll get it
next
figured
week.
out.
Next week. Good morning, everyone, and we'll see you later.